Good morning, Gearheads. Welcome to Speed City F1 on Sirius XM. We're excited. We got the Formula One Portuguese Grand Prix coming up in about an hour. This is John Massengill. I'm sitting in the studio in Austin, joined in the studio with Les Kaiser. Good morning, Mr. Kaiser.
Good morning. Good morning.
And we have over Zoom Mr. Bob Varsha. Mr. Varsha, how are you this morning?
A little bit sleepy. It was a long night last night, but I'm ready to go. Thanks. It's race day.
It's race day. That's right. We're excited. Well, like I said, we're about an hour away from the Portuguese Grand Prix, and we are excited to have everybody joining us. And I think I'm going to talk about what all we've got besides some race coverage today, because we have a couple of more clips from our exclusive interview with Gunther Steiner. And we caught up with Gunther about a week ago, and we got some good stuff from Gunther. I love the brutal honesty sometimes you get from Gunther. I mean, he really is, in my mind, the most honest or sincere, and when you interview him, then in all the team principals in Formula One. So we got a couple of clips from him.
I got to toot our own horn a little bit. I think the reason we get that kind of message and sincerity from him is because he understands what we're doing. We're trying to grow the Formula One fan base in the United States and Canada. And, over all these interviews and his engagements we've had in person here and around the world, he gets what we're doing too, and he wants to share the background, which is what fans like.
Yeah. And I think that more than anything, as we've seen on Netflix, he is just who he is. He doesn't put on pretense or airs or anything else.
No, certainly not.
I see everybody
Sometimes
smiling.
no filters.
Yes. In fact, you know what? If the producer has it ready, I want to play a little 20-second clip of Gunther Steiner, because he talks about his popularity on Netflix. Actually, because Jonathan Green, who's not with us this morning because Jonathan is out in at Laguna Seca doing a Trans Am broadcast out there. But we've got this clip of Gunther where Jonathan asks him if he ever thought he would have the fame that he does. So we got that one. Let's play that.
Listen, Gunter, we'll leave you on a personal note. Did you ever think that you would be the most popular man in Formula One on Netflix when you started your career in Formula One?
No, and no, I didn't. And I'm still not sure if that is true. But anyway, I don't know. If it is like this, it is like this. But that was never my aim when I got into motorsport, to be the most famous man on Netflix.
We were watching the clip too, and his grin, ear to ear, he really did light up, and that's pretty cool. But hey, let me give out the phone number this morning if you want to call and join the show. It's 512-643-5483, 512-643-LIVE if you want to call and join us. We want to hear your opinions about what you expect for the race today. And of course, after the race, we're going to have our 1 hour post show, and you can call in and tell us what you thought of the race. But we do have a caller on the line. We have, I think it's regular. We got Larry. Larry, welcome to Speed City.
Well, I thank you very much. I appreciate you. What's this I hear about Honda getting out of F1 and selling all of their engine apparatus to Red Bull?
Yeah, that has been the discussion. Bob Varsha, would you want to answer our caller on that one?
Well, sure. I'm sure it's a lot more complicated than we think. But yes, Honda will be getting out. And I think it was a masterstroke of negotiation on a part of all the guys from Red Bull that they were able to cut a deal to get all those engines and advance the whole project through a new company they founded, Red Bull Powertrain Technologies or something like that. Hired away the number one guy, or one of the top guys at Mercedes Powertrains, to lead that effort. So it bodes pretty well for not only Red Bull and AlphaTauri, who also use the engine, but they can turn that into a customer income stream as well. As to why Honda did it, well, like all the manufacturers, they're just investing gigundous amounts of money into electric technology. And I guess they just decided that, the budgets wouldn't bear Formula One level investment along with retooling for all these EVs that have to be introduced in the years to come.
Well, aren't they also a little bit chagrined at their lack of success in F1 and their relative success in IndyCar, which is much more visible in the U.S. market than anything in F1 because they're really not making the splash they want to in F1? And won't this help Red Bull's, because aren't they tied in with some hypercar project? And it's not just the engine technology. They got their hands on the MGU-H and the KERS technology and all the rest as well, didn't they?
Yeah, I don't know all of the details of that, but when it comes to the different car makers and their subsidiaries, I think Acura is going to produce a hypercar for endurance racing once again. You know, the manufacturers blow with the wind. You know, they're going wherever the marketing tells them they need to go in order to sell vehicles. So yeah, there's a lot of proprietary technology involved. I don't know how much of that Red Bull's going to get. In my mind, it kind of smacks of when Ross Brawn built his Brawn Racing team that took Jenson Button to the World Championship in 2009, and then turned around and sold the team to Mercedes, who had pretty much funded the whole operation. And Jackie Stewart did the same thing with Ford back in Stewart Grand Prix. They won a couple of races using Ford money, and then Jackie turned around and sold it back to Ford for a couple $100 million. So this is not unprecedented in Formula One. The numbers just seem to get bigger every year.
Well, I think it's a good move for Red Bull, and it's a logical extension of everything that they're doing because they seem to have a handle on chassis technology. I mean, really have a handle on it. And it would seem a logical progression for their team if they want to grow and become much more successful and really be on an equal footing with Mercedes and Ferrari, who are doing both engine and chassis. If you're going to be a player with the big boys instead of just on the periphery and taking it to them now and then, you've kind of sort of got to play with their rules. Do you see it that way?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you want to be right in there fighting with them. And keep in mind, Honda is a racing company. The founder, Soichiro Honda, said, we are not a car company that goes racing. We are a racing company that builds cars for the street. And so that's always been a part of what they call the Honda spirit, is to build cars. At one point, a couple of decades ago, I guess now, Honda engineers built a Formula One car. They weren't in the sport at the time after all their successes with McLaren in the 80s. And a bunch of their engineers built a Formula One car on their own time to show the company that they could do this. And this is something that's not unprecedented at Honda. Their famous twin engine private jet was also an engineer going off on his own to show this entrepreneurial spirit and this technological genius, if you will. So yeah, this is not unusual for Honda to do this sort of thing.
Okay, well, it bears watching, I think, for the future because, like I say, it is really a logical step from Red Bull to make that, to get on equal footing with Mercedes and Ferrari, especially if they have success. Because they certainly, with Max, they've got just as good a talent in the cockpit as everybody else, I think. He's just got to have something he can showcase, I think. And for them to get an engine program and really get an engine program established puts them on equal footing with Mercedes and Ferraris and makes them one of the absolute major players in F1. I think it's a smart move for them if they truly get their hands on the current technology from Honda. That'd be great. And I think it'd be great for the sport.
Sure. And how far can we be from the first Red Bull badged street car?
Ooh, yeah.
See, that's what I was saying, about them building a hypercar for the street. That puts them in the same league as Aston Martin or McLaren because they have the technology to do the entire thing. They can do the chassis fine, but it's drivetrain, and then have access to current F1 technology in a drivetrain. Hypercars are just screaming in agony at the competition they fear from Red Bull, I think.
Yeah. And that's another thing Honda did that I thought was interesting was the whole point of their racing involvement, or at least one of the main points, was that they would shuttle their streetcar engineering staff through the racing team. It wasn't like most other manufacturers where you just have a race team and those men and women just do that. And Honda, you could be working on, the next iteration of the CRX or something, and you might be posted with the Formula One team for a while. And I think that accounted for a lot of the frustration and lack of success they had early on, because that's a really weird and unique chemistry to be putting fairly raw, if knowledgeable, engineers out there to build your racing cars, particularly in Formula One technology terms these days.
Hey, Larry, where are you calling from this morning?
I'm in Georgia. I'm headed over to some customer whose name I've never heard, a place I've never been. So I got to deliver at 10:30 in the morning. And as for Mr. Varsha's point about how Honda does things, I think it's very wise on Honda's part because they don't have experienced engineers locked into the way they've always done it. They've always got fresh minds with great educations and some grounding, but they get a lot more thought outside the box because they don't really have preconceived notions. I think it's smart to run the youngsters through.
Oh, I'm totally with you.
Yep.
I love it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, Larry, who are you rooting for today?
Oh, gosh. I wish you had to ask me, but I'm pulling for Alonso. He's the man. I'm pulling for Fernando. I really am. I want to see him do good things. I always like, especially with his success in endurance racing, and he is an absolute genius in the rain. I'd love to see him on equal footing with anybody out there in the rain. I think he's the premier wet driver on the series. I want to see Alonso do well. It'd be great for the sport and great for everything having to do with motorsports. Get that guy time in a seat so he can come to NASCAR and take the Daytona 500.
There you go. And I don't want Alonso to have this season as a swan song. I want him to come out, the curtains to part. Here was fantastic. Way to end things, a standing ovation, all of that. That's what I want to see from Fernando.
One of the big early stories of the season, is the fact that young Esteban Ocon is kind of throwing shade on Fernando Alonso right now. But as you point out, Freddie, as David Hobbs used to call him, doesn't have a lot of time in the car.
That's right. Hey, Larry, thanks a lot for calling, buddy. We appreciate you listening, too.
Travel safe.
I'll do it.
Wave
Thanks,
as you
guys.
go by.
You're really very generous. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
wave
you.
to Bob as you go through Atlanta.
That's right, Bob. Wave to Bob. He's in Atlanta. It's funny. I had in my notes about Alonso, we've seen a flash or two maybe of the old Alonso, but really been fairly quiet this season, so far.
And that's that's really why I said what I just did is I was hoping to see a lot better from Fernando. I wanted to see him get out there and be the charging bull, get up front, be graceful about it, and deliver as we saw in years much prior to the last time he was in F1.
Yeah. Well, we can't come to Portugal in May without thinking of a fateful day back in 1994. Bob, you were broadcasting in Formula One back then, weren't you?
Mm-hmm. That's right. I was working with Derek Daly for ESPN on that May 1st weekend at Imola when we lost both Roland Ratzenberger and Ayrton Senna.
Well, I remember where I was as well, like I'm sure everybody was. So, well, guys, let's go to break. But before we go to break, I want to have a word from our sponsor because the Speed City F1 pre-race show on SiriusXM is brought to you by CrowdStrike. Use the cloud to secure your team at the office, at the track, or anywhere with CrowdStrike at crowdstrike.com/anywhere. All right, let's go ahead and take a break. And when we come back, we'll continue our Formula One coverage here on SiriusXM and back after these messages.
I'm Jenny Gow from BBC F1. You are listening to Speed City.
You're listening to Speed City F1 on Sirius XM.
All right, welcome back to the show. We are about 45 minutes from the Formula One Portuguese Grand Prix. Les Kaiser, you have a comment?
I do. We're all sitting here on camera, bobbing our head to AC/DC. Bob, Brian Johnson has been racing some of the classic and vintage cars over the years. Have you met him or come across him? What's this guy like?
Oh, he's just like what you would think from any clips of him. You know, that guy you see up on stage, that's what he's like all the time. I almost got involved in a business project with Brian, who was proposed by an Australian production company to host a series about vintage cars. And they wanted, you know, somebody working with Brian who does a lot of television with regard to motorsports. And so we talked for a while. The project never really got off the ground, but that was really exciting. I met Brian out at Road Atlanta. He was out at the Midi, you know, working the barbecue and, you know, making people laugh constantly. He has no filter. I will say that, but he is just what you'd think he would be.
I want to work with that guy. Okay, let's get this going, because think of this, you know, Brian and Bob on camera together. I don't know that.
Well, all you need to do is throw in Sammy Hagar, who we hung out with at
Done
Coda one Sunday, driving a Ferrari around.
There you go.
Yeah.
All righty.
That would be a nice, fun broadcast. But, well, guys, let's talk about Portimao and what to expect today, because we're going to get into qualifying and all those things here in a few minutes, but let's talk about the track and what to expect a little bit. I mean, for one, the wind, I think yesterday affected qualifying, and I think that could possibly even affect some of the racing. And, I mean, Bob, what do you think of when you think of this circuit, first of all?
Well, I love Portugal. I love the old Estoril track, which was the home of the Portuguese Grand Prix that I covered for many years. I have not been to Portimao, I must say, but it looks to be beautifully designed. At first glance, I would have guessed that it was a Herman Tilke track, because it looked very much like that architect's style, but it was not. It was designed by another gentleman, and it's just awesome. It has all the things I like in a road course: elevation changes, a wide variety of turns, and it's got a very wide surface, a slippery surface, it must be said, but it's wide, and that allows for a lot of passing, which is why last year we saw 58 overtakes on track as opposed to in the pits, which was the most among any track. It's got to be exhilarating to drive. I mean, just look at that picture. You see at the lower left, this long, fast corner. Kind of reminds me of turn 3 at Barcelona. Some of those corners are blind too, so it's amazing that we only lost one car due to a collision last year, and that was Sergio Perez.
Yeah, looking at some of the elevation change in those blind corners, honestly, it kind of reminded me of the corkscrew at Laguna Seca. But Les, what were you going to say?
Yeah, exactly. And you know, with the thing that I remember from last year was Kimi passing in places that people don't usually pass, and he seems to love this course, and the blind corners don't scare him. I'm guessing he's got a lot of faith in his spotters on the wall, letting him know where things are going on. But you're right. One of the things, you know, we talked about the wind in I think it's turn 9. It is such a long curve that wind is basically coming in multiple directions through the course of that curve. And that was something that was catching a few guys off course yesterday. So that's
it's hard to imagine these cars are as sensitive to wind as they seem to be. Of course, Indy cars too, at the Speedway in Indianapolis, the drivers often talk about the effect of the wind. And as you point out, Les, going up from 9 to 10, not only do you have the wind, but you get the car getting light over the top of the brow, and pretty soon the back wheels are chasing the front wheels off the track.
Yeah, you don't think of a big, powerful, race car being affected by wind, but we think about all the tiny little winglets and the nuance of aerodynamics in a Formula One car. So I guess a little bit of extra wind could make a dramatic difference in the way a car behaves on the track and upsets the balance.
I'd love to hear from an aerodynamics engineer, because I suspect that these Formula One cars, as you point out, they're so complex, so cutting edge, and so technically on the limit. But I think that's for perfect air, I'll call it.
Yeah.
When you're hitting all these surfaces that are shaping where the air is going for maximum downforce and top speed and all that kind of thing. When that air is not perfect, when it's blowing sideways, as Les said, or coming from the back or what have you, suddenly all of your best laid plans go out the window and the driver's got a handful of steering wheel.
I wish I knew enough to be able to understand what Adrian Newey says and how he would explain this.
Yeah. Hey, Les, speaking of Kimi Räikkönen and his spotters, did you hear him yesterday in qualifying talking about, all these cars were coming around him, and he was like, basically, I think he said something like, look, guys, everybody's coming around me. Is it going to be my turn to go at some point? And he was complaining to his spotters about that. I said, that's classic Kimi for us.
Yeah, there's one thing, and, we've seen that in some of the other races and other quali sessions, is that there's kind of a driver's etiquette that you kind of queue up in some ways, and you do pass or you don't pass in certain areas as you're getting ready for your flying lap. I've really put a lot of thought into this qualifying that basically encourages as in one, flying lap. And I want to discuss that in the post-race show.
Well, you know what? I think that is a nice little segue to the discussion that I wanted to have in this morning's show about the big news about sprint races coming to Formula One as an experiment. We're going to do a 3-race experiment starting at Silverstone. And I mean, this is about as controversial, not quite as controversial as, let's say, reverse grids, but the internet has exploded with, mostly negative as what I see. And I get it. I get that, that it may not work out, but I think I come down on the side of, you know what? I want to see an experiment. I want to see, because who knows, maybe it might work out better than we think. And I bet you that the first time that we have this experiment at Silverstone, that the television ratings and everything else are going to be sky high, because I think people are going to want to see what this is all about. Bob, I want to start with you and tell me what you think of it, about this, just the topic in general first.
Well, like you, I think I'm willing to consider anything. If it makes the sport better, the rising tide raises all boats, and we all have a lot more fun. Whether it will or not remains to be seen. Again, getting back to the complexities of these cars, the fact that the pandemic has led to much smaller crews at the racetrack, people start bending parts, and these are only 100 kilometers, 62-mile races. So, it could wind up looking like roller derby. And all of these teams wanted, extra money. I was surprised, frankly, that the teams seemed as willing to go along with this idea as they were, especially when, a figure of $500,000 per weekend extra for the teams got thrown around. So, let's see what happens. I'm always leery of adding complexity, because that makes it harder for TV guys like me to explain to the casual fan who may not understand quite what's going on out there. But what the heck? Let's give it a toss.
Yeah, I'm totally with you, Bob. I think we need to see an attempt test. Does it impact something? Well, sure, it's going to impact those 3 races, and how things play out. But it's not so much, I think it's going to upset a season. But we got to do something. We got to see some changes. Like I said, one of the things that sticks in my craw is that cameo appearance for this flying lap to, see somebody go take pole. I like the mix here.
I'm going to argue with you a little bit, is that the racing is pretty good right now, right? This season, we got so far this season.
Yes.
These 2 races, it's been pretty fantastic. But what I think that they're trying to do, and they've come out and said it, is essentially add a little more entertainment. I was thinking about it. We had here in Austin, right? We got the announcement that Billy Joel is going to be the concert, right? So COTA has proven that if you add some entertainment, they will get, seats filled in the grandstands. So think about this: if you're a casual, race fan, let's say, and you're not off in the weeds like all of us and watch every single thing and read every single thing we can, you're going, oh, wait a minute. So on Saturday, I can go see a really cool concert and a miniature race, and then the full race on Sunday. So they're adding that element of entertainment too. So, as you can tell, I'm kind of leaning towards this. I
Yeah.
am absolutely, not saying this is something we need to do. I love the fact that it's an experiment.
Well, I can tell you, somebody who's going to be upset about it are the stat guys, like my old friend Sean Kelly, virtual stat man. It's one more thing for aficionados and professionals like Sean to keep track of, and it does tend, I think, to devalue some things. Like they've been monkeying with the points, the championship points, for years. They awarded 6 places, then 10 places, and it was 10 points for a win to 25 points for a win, which made the stat about career points earned basically irrelevant because there was no consistency to it. But, I keep thinking about McLaren CEO Zach Brown's manifesto, if you want to call it, a 3,500-page document he issued this week about his vision for Formula One going forward as a veteran marketer, very successful businessman, looking at Formula One saying, what do we need to do? And one of his main points was, we've got to be more entertaining, or at least trying to be more entertaining. We need to try things. And I think this fits right in line with what Zach was talking about.
I'd love to know what Zach has in that 3,500 pages, but I hope they make a movie out of it.
You're not going to read the whole thing. Well, let's talk about what they're proposing exactly. So they're now saying they're going to keep qualifying just the way it is, because I think everybody's pretty good on the way the qualifying works, but they move it to Friday, right? And so, and a little bit later in the days is what they're proposing, and none of this is set in stone at this point. So, but then you have the qualifying as we know it. And then that sets the finishing order there, sets the grid for the sprint race, which then the finishing order in the sprint race sets the grid for the race, the big race, the real race on Sunday. So I was watching something or listening to somebody, they were saying, so which is the pole stat? The qualifying pole or the pole? Which pole? So I would assume they're going to stick with the winner of the, to call it the pole winner of the sprint race, because that's the pole for the Sunday race. But that's what they're proposing. And, that gives you a little more incentive to watch something on Friday. Admittedly, for us, that's in the middle of the workday, so we'll see how that works. But also, it gives you more competitive racing. You get about the same amount of time on track, let's say, the cars do throughout the weekend. But now we got a little more competitive, where instead of just practice, which I do enjoy the practices in a different way, but it's going to add that competitive, 30 or 40 minutes of this 20 laps that we're going to get. So I don't know, maybe that's adds another element to it.
I agree. The element of entertainment, is one thing to have cars in practice. And, most of the time I feel like practices where the team is just like focusing on one item and we don't even know what they're focusing on. But, okay, why did they go fast right there? That didn't seem like anything. And then they put her around the rest of the sectors of the course. And so part of it is, I think, having them run, full speed in fury during the sprint is definitely going to up the entertainment value. Whereas, leading up to practice and then quali is practices, we don't know exactly what they're doing. I wish I knew what, okay, hey, Mercedes is working on some aero right now, and, Alpha is working on some power, and Haas is working on not spinning. But whatever it is, we want to do it. I want to know what they're working on.
Yeah. Well, along those lines, and a lot of these details are being worked out as we speak, so we can't be definitive. But one of the things I understand will take place is that the cars go into park for May conditions, meaning nothing can be changed on them, as early as that Friday afternoon activity that you described, John. And to me, that's really sketchy. Formula One has long been its own worst enemy. Yeah, they want more entertainment. Yeah, they want more cars on track, turning more laps, and they want them to be faster and noisier. But at the same time, they cut back on testing. They cut back on the number of tires you can have to go around there. And, it just, they're kind of burning the candle at both ends, trying to achieve a bigger show.
Yeah, those are counterintuitive goals, aren't they? The bigger show plus what really is the heart of Formula One and the technology and the advancements. And I did read, Bob, where you're right, Park for May starting Friday, but they're going to allow some changes, limited changes is all they're saying. I heard something about possible weight distribution changes, cooling breaks, and some limited number of changes, because if they didn't allow any changes, it's like, well, why are we doing this all again? So they have to allow some, but we'll see. But
I'm looking weather.
Yeah.
But guys, we need to go ahead and take another quick break. And when we come back, we'll continue our discussion and get a little more into qualifying from yesterday. Listen to Speed City live from Austin, Texas, back after a quick break.
Hello to everyone, this is Gunther Steiner, this is Speed City.
You're listening to Speed City F1 on Sirius XM.
All right, welcome back to the show. Got a little Sammy Hagar bringing us back. He can't drive 55.
He drove a 458 and loved it.
He did drive a 458 out on COTA. That's right. That's what it was. Well, hey, let me get a word in from our sponsors real quick. Has your workforce moved from the office to the home or to the garage, or maybe a rented cabin with open Wi-Fi? If your company's expanded outside the office and moved all your applications to the cloud, there's a whole new world of threats you have to worry about, including ransomware. CrowdStrike revolutionized security by harnessing the speed and power of the cloud to identify and stop the most advanced cyber attacks, even those that have not been seen before. So now you can work securely anywhere. Try CrowdStrike Falcon free today and protect your data and employees anywhere. Welcome to Anywhere, CrowdStrike. We stop breaches. Access the CrowdStrike Falcon platform free at crowdstrike.com/anywhere.
You know what I find amazing? Sorry to talk business for a minute. CrowdStrike has become so involved in what we do as motorsports fans. We were out at the Circuit of the Americas yesterday, and there were some races being run. And I kid you not, CrowdStrike, I just looked at it and really, was looking around. I felt like CrowdStrike was on half the cars out there in, contingency, advertising, sponsorship.
They were
of this
right,
motorsport. Yeah. It was absolutely phenomenal, and thanks to CrowdStrike and quite honestly other businesses that sponsor and advertise and offer contingency money to this sport. Thank you very much.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you very much. Hey, you know what?
CrowdStrike even has a driver.
That's right. Because it's the CEO, and we've got a couple of clips from him. Thank you, Bob. Nice segue.
There you go.
Really, anytime we get an American company sponsoring Formula One, that's exciting to us. So, because we want to try to grow the sport here in the United States. But I want to play this clip. It talks about, this is the CEO, George Kurtz. He talks about how Mercedes, how they help Mercedes with their technology and their cybersecurity. As we all know, thinking about all the data in Formula One, it's a massive thing. So let's hear from CrowdStrike CEO George Kurtz.
There's a tremendous amount of data in Formula One, and the amount of data that goes back to the factory and gets analyzed is incredible, as you probably well know. So we think about, the new cars, the parts, the upgrades, and how competitive it is. Obviously, they have to protect all that data. They wouldn't want it leaked. That's one big part of it. The second part of it is really around things like threats that are, I would say, very current right now. Ransomware. If a Formula One team gets hit with ransomware, what happens? You can't race that weekend and all your data's gone. I mean, it's a massive impact. And it isn't, in today's environment, it isn't just one computer that gets infected, it's an entire network. So when you look at availability, resiliency, and the protection of this critical information, they thought CrowdStrike was a great partner. It's easy to use, it works. And when you look at the return on their investment, what we're doing for them, we're saving them a lot of money, and we're providing much better efficacy than what they had.
Yeah, it's a big deal in Formula One, data and technology and protecting all that. So we thank those guys for keeping our sport safe. Well, guys, I want to move on to qualifying in Portugal because, the thing that stood out to me more than anything was the fact that the Red Bull cars were not the fastest cars on track as we saw the first couple of races. But let me run down the results real quick, and then we can talk about the nuance of all of that. But Valtteri Bottas on pole because he had a nice day yesterday and was faster by a sliver over his teammate Lewis Hamilton, followed by Max Verstappen and his teammate Sergio Perez. And then the Ferrari, Carlos Sainz, faster than Leclerc this qualifying session. And then Esteban Ocon, Lando Norris, who's looked great, Charles Leclerc in the other Ferrari, then Pierre Gasly in the AlphaTauri, Sebastian Vettel looking a little better, qualified in 10th. Then George Russell, Antonio Giovinazzi, Fernando Alonso, Yuki Tsunoda, Kimi Räikkönen, Daniel Ricciardo way down in 16th. Lance Stroll, another bit of surprise down in 17th. Nicholas Latifi, Mick Schumacher, and Nikita Mazepin, the Haas team, bringing up the rear of that. But Bob Varsha, I want to start with you. What do you think about, what's your first impression of overall for the qualifying yesterday?
Well, I think the thing that struck me most was how the drivers for some of the teams, certainly not the big teams, you got both Mercedes, you got both Red Bulls and both Ferraris up there in the top 10. But after that, there was a lot of division. I mean, Daniel Ricciardo with the McLaren going out in Q1, while his teammate Lando Norris goes all the way to number 7. Lance Stroll out in Q1, while his teammate Sebastian Vettel ends a 16-race streak off the top 10 by breaking into Q3. And I think it goes back to the nature of this track and the fact that it's only been in the series now. This is the second time. So I think the experience factor of last year worked for a lot of the drivers and worked against drivers like Fernando Alonso, who's never raced a Formula One car at this place. So that and the wind and the slippery track conditions, I think is going to make for a pretty exciting race for just that reason, because the form book is going to kind of go out the window here. You can pass. You can be sure that guys will attempt passes, sometimes to their detriment, perhaps. But that was the first thing that struck me, was that one teammate would do really well and the other one was really struggling, which doesn't, on the face of it, make sense. But that's Formula One.
One of the things you mentioned, the slippery track. Well, not only is the texture in the asphalt a low traction quotient at this one, the tire specs that are out are towards the harder end of the current season of tire selections. Those two things, I think, are going to play into a lot of things. I think the drivers who deal with a loose car, one that slides around a lot, I think those are the drivers we're going to see shine today. And, it was interesting. As I watched, I was pleased to see Carlos Sainz up there. And for a split second, I was like, wow, he really does well in a loose condition. Well, I had to only think, like I said, for a split second to realize that one generation is Carlos Sainz Sr., who is
he does like a slippery surface.
Who is all about slippery and dirty surfaces. And so at that point it was like, gosh, there may be something to that. I think there are two people that I'm going to call to watch in today's race. Kimi, because he passes where people don't pass, on this course, as we saw last year. And Carlos Sainz, the slippery slope might put him onto the podium.
Okay, I can accept those. I like that. We didn't mention the fact that Hamilton was on looking for his 100th pole this weekend, and his teammate denied him of that. So that was part of the story from this weekend as well.
It's gotta feel good.
Yeah,
it's got to feel phenomenal. And here's what I think it did. So, absolutely, I think you could have lost money in Vegas if you were betting that Hamilton would get the 100th pole. I think that was almost a given. But to have Bottas step up when there was so much attention given to Hamilton and this 100th pole that was expected to happen, I think Bottas just got more publicity than he has in several years of what a quality driver he is, because Hamilton wanted that 1-0-0 today, this weekend.
Yeah, that's one of the fascinating things about that driver pairing in particular. You've got Lewis Hamilton, and there is no higher profile figure in motorsports anywhere on the planet than Lewis Hamilton. And his teammate is this traditionally quiet, demure Finn, another Iceman cometh. And so for him to get this, I'm sure he allowed himself a very special smile inside the helmet when it was made clear that he had won the pole. Yeah, but getting to that tire thing, another thing that happened I thought was interesting was so many of the top guys, including Lewis Hamilton, went out on the soft red, the softest compounds in first qualifying, which is very unusual. And then on the medium tire, the yellow stripe, in the second qualifying, Lewis Hamilton set the fastest lap of the weekend, which would not be that unusual because the second qualifying is so important for the guys who are bound to make Q3. But the fact that in Q3, Hamilton got back on that yellow tire and couldn't come close to the lap he had done in Q2, which may be put down to the prevailing conditions, the wind change direction, the track is still rubbering in and all that kind of thing. But for that reason, I think the tire situation is a complete toss-up this weekend. The Pirelli company that makes the tires issues a release just before the race indicating what tires each driver has available. And a number of real front-running guys have no more reds available whatsoever. They're going to rely entirely on the white striped hardest compound and the yellow striped medium. And I think the fact that the tires are lasting a long time, Max Verstappen did his fastest time on a set of mediums on Friday on his 18th lap, which is an old set of tires by the standards of those tracks. So you're going to see great big long pit windows. Nobody's going to want to be in the pits more than once because of the long pit lane and the big price you will pay in terms of track position. I think this is really going to be a fascinating race, and I hope we have a nice sunny day in Portugal to enjoy it.
Yeah, I hope we get good weather. And I think you're right, Bob. I think that Daniel Ricciardo was a full second off his teammate Lando Norris. To me, that's the biggest shock of the qualifying. But I think you're right. I think it all boils down to all these variables, whether it's the wind, the tires, the track, the inexperience at the circuit. But all of that adds up to a potentially great race. So
I don't think Daniel has got up on this horse yet and has his car clearly planted yet. There's a lot of things different when he's come to this team. And so I'm disappointed he's not there already. But I have a feeling once he gets it set the way he wants and the aspects that are variable for the driver, once he gets that set, I think he's going to be a formidable force again.
Yeah, I think Daniel has not found his mojo, or maybe he loaned it to Sebastian Vettel. Because what'd you say, Bob? This was the first time in 16 races that he made it to Q3?
He's been in Q3, yep. And it'll be interesting to see if he can make it stick or whether it was just an aberration of the conditions on this day. And one more thing about Bottas, after the mess he made in Imola 2 weeks ago, colliding with George Russell, I don't care who you blame. The fact is you had two pieces of junk by the side of the road and two very aggressive drivers telling each other they were number one. It was Bottas had a lot to make up for. And I think this pole probably went a long way to doing that for him, for Mercedes.
Yeah, he kind of needed that, didn't he?
Yeah. He is, 7th in the championship, 28 points behind his teammate. and on a 1-year contract again.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, expensive pieces of junk. That's not just because of what was on the side of the road, but
Right.
quite honestly, as you stated, this could be a career-limiting move if something like this were to happen another time this year in season.
I think that's absolutely possible.
Yeah. Hey, speaking of the driver's standing, let's run down that real quick because we got a couple of races under our belt, so it's starting to mean something. So we got Lewis Hamilton with 44 points, 1 point behind him, Max Verstappen with 43. Then Lando with 27 points. And then Charles Leclerc, 20 points. Bottas with 16. Carlos Sainz, 14. Daniel Ricciardo, also 14. Sergio Perez with 10 points. Hoping he'll have a good day today. Pierre Gasly with 6. Lance Stroll with 5. Yuki Tsunoda with 2 points. Ocon with 2. Alonso with a point. And everybody else with nothing. But, guys, let's go ahead and take our last break. And then we'll be inside of 15 minutes before the race. You listen to Speed City live from Austin. Back after these messages.
Hi, this is Max Verstappen, and you're listening to Speed City.
You're listening to Speed City F1 on Sirius XM.
That's Mr. Billy Joel you hear in the background, and he will be coming to Austin, Texas for the United States Grand Prix.
I don't think he's bringing Christy Brinkley, though.
I
think that's long out of date.
Count on that.
You're showing your age, Mr. Kaiser.
I hope he doesn't. I hope he doesn't.
Long Islander.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think Austin has proven that is a formula that works because we saw. I mean, I think the biggest one was when Taylor Swift was here. I think they said it was like they sold an extra almost 100,000 tickets or something that they thought were influenced or in some form or fashion by that.
Yeah. No kidding.
And most of them arrived after the racing was over.
It really was. I had the opportunity to speak to Bobby Epstein yesterday out at the track, and he was nothing but smiles with the Formula One tickets. Folks, you need to get onto this, and sooner than later, especially if you want reserved seating. Things are going gangbusters.
That's right. They announced the tickets went on sale this week.
And that's from sources beyond Bobby himself.
Well, yeah, I talked to some of the guys, and I ran into a guy who's there with one of the ticket brokers, and he was like, the demand is like they've never seen. And I mean, and that's saying something because the last few years, I mean, we've averaged about 250,000 people over the 3 days. You know that's how they divide it up, but still, well over 100,000 on race day, like 120, 125, and that's going back to the the earliest days of of USGP here in Austin. I mean, it never really. We had the rain disaster of like 2016 or whatever it
Somewhere
was.
around there, yeah.
But we've never, somebody said, boy, it really dropped off. Well, it dropped off, but not dramatically. But the numbers are now back to where they were, which is around 250 for 3 days.
Well, this week I had Go ahead, Bob.
Go ahead, Les.
What's that, Bob?
Trying to sell tickets for Canada, which has now been officially replaced for the second straight year on the calendar by Turkey in this case. I really feel for the folks in Montreal, and there's probably a lot of Canadian fans listening to this broadcast. We really feel for you guys. Montreal is a great town, great place to watch a Formula One race, and it's just, we're sick that you can't have your race this year.
Yeah, one of the best, right? One of the most popular, too.
Absolutely.
You've been up there, Les, right?
Oh, name drop time from Les. So I step out of my apartment.
We should make that a regular segment.
Yeah, name dropping. Well, hey, I know how privileged I am to be able to, meet these people. And I love sharing it with the audience, with friends, with anybody that won't walk away. So, so I step out of the apartment I rented for Montreal race 2 years ago. First time I've been there. Was just excited. It was a Saturday evening, and walked down the stoop there, and Romain Grosjean is walking down the street right there, and we're headed in the same way. We get to talking, and he goes, "I think you're really going to like Montreal. It's a lot like Austin. It's lively. There's music. There's a lot of things going on." He said that that just replicates Austin, and that he loves Montreal and Austin. Said they're two of his absolute favorites on the season calendar. And so we're missing Romain this year, but that'll give you a clue. If you are looking to travel somewhere and visit, I highly recommend Montreal. I'll go back for sure.
Yeah,
absolutely.
What about Turkey, Bob? What do you think about that?
Love it. Love the track. It is the Tilke creation. In the first few years, they had trouble with access and egress because there was basically one highway, and it's on the other side of the Bosphorus River that, I guess, cartographically speaking, separates Europe from Asia. So it's on the Asia side of the Bosphorus, but it's a fabulous track. And great to watch as well as great to drive. The drivers love it. It's already seen history, even though its time in Formula One has been somewhat limited. And so I think it's great to see it there. It's accessible for the teams, and it always puts on a good show.
Yeah, well, that's you hate to see Canada go away, but at least we've got something exciting there. But well, guys, we got about 5 minutes left before we go out to the BBC race coverage here, and let's talk about we've talked about what we expect on kind of the big scale of the fact that we've got some wind and we've got not the most track time here. We expect an exciting race, but
hard tires. Yeah.
Well, what do you think, Les? Let's start talking about. I mean, do you think that the Red Bull car? We've seen it fast. All from testing on, it's looked like the fastest car, but all of a sudden this weekend it doesn't seem as fast.
No, it doesn't seem as fast at the end of quali, but Max is still up there. He's still in the hunt. I think he's going to be there. I want to see Max come up there and be up front. We've seen him there. We know he wins occasionally over this, but to me, don't be surprised if he does wind up in there. I want to see Alfa Romeo come up there and stay up front and be there. And we may have that situation today.
What about you, Bob? Go ahead.
Well, I'm sitting here thinking about our show around the Imola weekend 2 weeks ago, where right about now the feed came up on television, and we saw that it was raining in Italy. So that shocked everybody. I don't think that's going to be the case in Portugal, which is a very dry country. I'm with Les. I picked Max Verstappen to win at Imola, and he did. And I have a feeling Max can do it here as well. I was really impressed with the way he handled his tires in practice. He was extraordinarily frustrated by not at least getting on the front row and likely getting pole. So that tells me he knows he's got something for these guys. And so I'll go ahead and predict Max will do well. I mean, you can't look past Lewis Hamilton's skills Valtteri Bottas, as good as he is, has yet to show this year that he is on top of his game. Granted, it's only round 3 of a long season, but there it is. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to be watching Sebastian Vettel and the Ferraris.
Yeah,
and all those other guys in this race.
Sebastian is one. I've kind of been bashing on. I say bashing. I've been saying for a couple of years now. Sebastian's made so many mistakes, and he, said earlier he kind of lost his mojo. That's what it feels like. It feels like he's just lost his mojo. It'll be great if the result that we saw in qualifying is a predictor of the race to see him kind of get it back. And maybe it is. Bob, you've always been saying that he needs a certain type of car. Maybe he's maybe they maybe made some changes for the car to match him, or maybe he's just figuring it out. But that's one of the ones I want to watch today. And Daniel Ricciardo, think about him coming from back there. That could be exciting to watch. You know he's fast. So because I think of Daniel Ricciardo as one of the top tier drivers. You maybe have Max and Lewis at the top of that tier, but the next tier down, I definitely put Ricciardo there. So having him come through, I think will be.
But he's got to get by. Ricciardo's got to get by the oldest guy in the series and one of the toughest guys to pass, which is Kimi Räikkönen.
Yeah.
And he's got to get by the youngest guy in the series, who also uses all of the road and then some in Yuki Tsunoda in the AlphaTauri. So Ricciardo's going to have to eye those guys very carefully before he makes his move, and it'll be fun to watch. I agree.
You know what? I think that will actually be a strong pairing, is having Daniel and Kimi trying to charge to the front. They may actually work a little bit together to get up there, pulling one or the other up in the wake as they go. And then, it's certainly going to come to their own battle at some point. But I think there's some opportunity for both those guys to make a hard charge for the front.
I'm glad you brought up Yuki Tsunoda, Bob, because he's one of my. I'm really excited about him. I don't know why. I don't know what has intrigued me. Japanese. I don't know what. I'm just really excited to see him do well, and I don't know. I want to watch him and closely, and I have been. But another one, of course. Well, go ahead, Bob. What were you going to say about Yuki?
Well, I was just going to say I agree with you. I mean, with all that Japan as a country and as a motorsports community have brought to Formula One and racing generally, they deserve more success. And if it's Tsunoda, great.
Yeah, more power to him. And Lando, to me, I've become enamored with him over the last couple of years too. He's so exciting to watch and has proven that he's a great personality, and he's fun to watch outside the racing. But he's proven that he is a phenomenal race car driver. So he's going to be one to watch.
Remember the days of Red Bull having the two drivers and they did their own little podcast kind of interviews and picking on each other?
Yeah.
Okay, if they don't put Lando and Daniel Ricciardo into a series like that right now, they are totally missing out.
They're wasting those personalities, aren't they?
And don't forget George Russell. I mean, when was the last time we saw Williams by 11th?
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, we are out of time in the pre-show, but don't forget we are here for another hour after the race. We want you to call in, get your pen, and write it down. Phone number 512-643-5483. We want to hear your opinions. Call up and ask Bob Varsha a question that you've always wanted to ask him. But we're going to go out to the BBC guys now for the race coverage, and we will talk to you after the race.